Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My guest today is Mr. Glenn Carle, who's a former CIA officer. Glenn has worked for the CIA from 1985 to 2007, and his last position including assessing terrorist threats at a national level. Welcome, Glenn. Thanks for your time. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on what you did at CIA?
Sure. I had an unusual career. Most officers either serve as, to simplify, operations officers, who are the ones that we watch movies about. We work overseas most of the time, and our job is to, the job of an operations officer is to recruit spies to steal secrets. Or CIA officers work as analysts, and they spend most of their career, to simplify again, at headquarters in Washington, and their job is to assess all the information collected by the likes of me in the field, or newspapers, or satellites, or any conceivable kind of information. It's called all source assessment. My career is unusual because I did both jobs at different times in my career. I was, by training in most of my years, an operations officer in the field, but my last position, which you mentioned, was as, it's a long title, we're long-winded in the CIA, was as Deputy National Intelligence Officer for transnational threats. And that meant that it was the most senior position in the US intelligence community to assess any threat that crossed the border. And that, during my years, predominantly meant terrorism, but it also included narcotics issues, or nuclear proliferation, international crime, and so on.
Okay, today we will be talking about Afghanistan. So the first thing I would like to hear your opinion on was what happened in the last months the only possible outcome of the war in Afghanistan, or was there another way out, in your opinion?
Well, the word out changes the question a little bit. If we were talking about the U.S. leaving Afghanistan, was what happened the only way that it could happen? No, but that is the most likely, and I feel quite strongly the correct path to have taken, the right decision to have made. It could have been that the United States simply stayed there and retained Afghanistan as a protectorate, and de facto colony in the modern sense, endlessly. And many responsible American officials believed that that was the right course. Biden has taken a huge hit politically for having left, because, of course, the Republicans will, Christ could return and they would denounce Biden for having, destabilized society and undermine religion. So it doesn't matter what Biden does; he will be criticized by the Republicans. But many Americans are troubled by what happened, and many people, and accept, or at least have bought into, the narrative that it was a mistake to leave, and chaos and poorly planned, blah, blah, blah. I think all of those statements are wrong. I feel this quite strongly and have for a long time. Now, one thing we didn't mention, which is relevant about my career, is that from 1997 until 2007, I had substantial responsibilities for Afghanistan. Now, prior to going on to the National Intelligence Council, my job was, I won't go into details, but I had significant responsibilities for Afghanistan. I was not the only person, of course, in a vast government, but my role was consequential. So Afghanistan is something that I don't claim to know, but I certainly know it better than most, at least for the critical period when bin Laden was there, prior to 9/11, and in the years after 9/11, when Afghanistan was relevant. So the questions are, was the American departure inevitable? Was it wise? And did it occur in a way that was inevitable? And if I can remember what the questions are that I just elucidated, Should we have left? The answer is yes. The alternative was we stay forever, and to what purpose? Now, certainly we were helping protect, I think it's 36 million Afghans from a totalitarian theological regime, and in particular, the rights of women. And that's a good thing to have done. And we were keeping Afghanistan from becoming a quote haven for international terrorism. But what are the vital, a nation should pursue its vital national interests. And to be blunt, much as my heart breaks for what's happening to Afghans, Afghanistan is not a vital national interest of the United States. It is highly unlikely that it will become a launching pad for an existential threat to the United States, to liberal democracies as a way of life, to freedom and all of these things. It just won't. And if there are attacks, the United States can and will act to parry them or to suppress them. And if they do occur, horrible as that is, are terrorist attacks an existential threat that mandates, that obliges the most powerful nation in the world to focus the preponderance of its power and attention onto that problem? And the answers to those questions are categorically no. It is not an existential threat, and it is not the primary interest of the United States. So the U.S. should have left, frankly, long ago, because we had no clear mission. Our mission devolved to protecting the Afghans while saying we were protecting ourselves from terrorism. We were protecting Afghans, but the threat of terrorism was, frankly, relatively minimal and not existential. Now, could we have left in a better way? The criticisms are, oh, you left these weapons. Oh, it was chaotic. And I think those, frankly, are either naive criticisms or made in bad faith by critics of President Biden. In any instance, we did lose. We lost. The Taliban triumphed. They were the party whom we did not want to triumph, and they did. But what did the United States do? It spent literally 20 years attempting to stand up a functioning, self-reliant government. It trained hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Afghan soldiers. It armed them, and yet they did not fight. Now, why? Because their government, as U.S. officials have known for many years, was so rife with corruption that there was insufficient identification in the government, belief in its future, or willingness to fight and possibly die for it. And that's a tragic thing, but the U.S. couldn't really do much about that. The U.S. tried. Could we have done better? Of course. Could we have made a decisive difference? 20 years of effort seem to indicate no. So then the chaos of, now the Taliban have all the weapons. Well, either the United States does its best to stand up an independent, self-reliant country, which necessitates arming it, which we did, or we assume the entire burden. And so we armed the country, and had we said, okay, we're leaving now, so we're going to take the weapons away so that the bad guys don't get them, well, then we would have castrated and neutered the country we're trying to foster. So that's, frankly, an irrational argument. And then the argument that there was chaos, well, it is terrible what happened, but had we announced, okay, 6 months from now, at a date certain, we, the United States, are leaving, and we're starting to draw down now, the chaos would have begun the day we announced it, which is what occurred. It is inevitable. It is terrible. I'm not trying to whitewash the tragedy of the event at all, but could a lost war and a departing power have avoided chaos and denuded the country we were trying to support of its weapons? The answers to those things should be obviously no. So the criticisms I frankly find on substance, on execution, to be spurious or at best naive.
Okay, let's try to set the point straight about something that you mentioned. Who made the worst mistakes? Was it the Trump administration by signing a peace deal with the Taliban, cutting off the Afghan government, or was it the Biden administration by going away from Afghanistan that fast?
Yeah, I don't think the Biden administration made a mistake.
Okay.
It's become the conventional wisdom to say that it did, that it's this American fiasco. I disagree with all of that vehemently. I'm very confident that Biden did not make a mistake. Did he make a decision that led to tragedy? Yes. Was the tragedy avoidable? In most ways, no. Was it the right decision? In most ways, yes. Should Trump have signed the agreement that he did? No. You'll rarely find me say anything positive about Donald Trump. However, in this one instance, I would say he was not wrong to try to leave. He was just characteristically incompetent, selfish, and destructive in how he went about whatever he went about. And in this instance, he just wanted to get out and could think of nothing beyond what seemed to make him look good, and yet contained harmful for the Afghans and harmful for American interests implications. He wasn't wrong, I think, to try to get out. I think the way he did it was, but whoever made the decision to leave and then left would have been shackled, as Biden has been, with chaos, tragedy, and criticism.
In the first weeks in August, the Taliban wanted to present themselves as more moderate or more modern. Well, to be honest with you, I don't believe it. I think they're just faking it. What are your thoughts? Is there any hope that they can be not as harsh or as evil as in the 90s, or it's going to be the same?
Yeah, they have, I used to have firsthand experience, extensive firsthand experience with the Taliban regime. I do not now have firsthand experience because now I'm a retired officer. I'm not serving as one with responsibilities in part for that country. But I have found consistently for years the current leadership of the Taliban to be substantially more sophisticated than the leaders with who were in power when I was still serving. That does offer some hope that the answer to your question is that they may have moderated some. Now, being smooth and sophisticated doesn't necessarily make you a humanist or a liberal. You can still be a murderer, selfish, or a theological person from the 7th century in your beliefs. The fear is that all of those points remain true. I have found them to be much more subtle so far, which does imply, I think, a degree of moderation relative at least to 1996, say, when I started to work with them. I don't anticipate that they will seek to export international terrorism, but of course we have better watch them for this.
Well, how come the Afghan army collapsed so fast? Was it expected?
Well, I think the answer, as I read the accounts of military, American military and American or allied military and allied intelligence and American intelligence officers, it's not a surprise that the Taliban won. There has been the assessment really for 15 years is that the government in Kabul couldn't stand on its own and was hopelessly corrupt. That's unchanged, which implies that it was unlikely to survive. And for years, it has been said that it's only because of the NATO and US presence that the government continued to function, and that roughly half of the territory remained under control of Kabul, a slowly declining percentage over the years of the control of the country. That doesn't mean, however, that the intelligence services could be able to predict how quickly it would collapse. Apparently, all parties were surprised at the rapidity of the collapse, not that it occurred. But I'm working on an article now for Newsweek, and I've been asked to essentially predict the year 2022, what's going to happen. And of course, that's a fool's errand, because you're guaranteed to get things wrong. The future is there are so many billions of variables that no one can get this right, and it's a standard misconception that intelligence services were always criticized when something goes wrong. We say, well, how come that's a failure? You didn't predict this. But we really cannot predict anything but mega trends such as global warming will continue in 2022. That I can state with confidence. Can I state with confidence that a hurricane will destroy the house next to me? Well, I cannot. So I don't think that it was a failure not to predict. I don't think it was a surprise, but it happened faster than anybody anticipated.
How come the Taliban are now in possession of so much American equipment, such as vehicles or weapons? I mean, weren't the Americans supposed to disable them before leaving?
Well, I tried to address that point a moment ago, that you either try to stand up a functioning, independent, capable army, which the United States did with the Afghan army, or you don't. And if you do, they will have weapons. And if you're leaving with 4,000 soldiers there, the thought of being able to disable a nation's military's entire stock of weapons and logistical capabilities in the matter of months without creating exactly the outcome that everyone criticizes the United States for having allowed it's a lunatic thought, frankly. It's just not possible to do. So they lost, and the victor got the spoils. I frankly don't see any way to have avoided that. Now, could there have been more removal of tanks or trucks or oil stocks or something? I don't, I suppose the answer to each of those questions will probably be yes. But at the macro level, could anything else have been likely to have occurred? I think the answer is pretty clearly no. No.
You already said something about my next point.
And this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. But
it is.
If the decision is taken to leave, that will happen. And I think that was the right decision, because there are larger problems that the United States needs to address, and can address far better, that are vital interest to the United States than protecting the Afghan army's stock of trucks and ammunition.
I also think that you cannot leave to your allies disabled equipment. Therefore, if they left the Afghan army working equipment and then the Taliban stole it,
well, that's right.
The answer to the question.
They laid down their arms and the victor took them. Which is not the outcome we wished, but the only way to have stopped it was to have continued there. And President Obama and then President Trump and both decided for 12 years that the political costs of leaving, despite their desire to do so, outweighed the benefits of taking that decision. That is the politically easier decision because it avoids the calamity that has occurred. But I think that Biden showed, frankly, statesmanship by making the hard decision, taking the significant political hits for what he believes, and I believe, is the larger vital national interest of the United States.
Okay, you already said something about my next point, but I would like you to elaborate. One big difference with the past is that now the Taliban are not allies with the biggest terrorist group in Afghanistan, which is ISIS Khorasan because they are at war with each other. While in the 90s, they were allies with Al-Qaeda and they let them run and build their training bases. Is this a big difference in your opinion? Well, I would like to explain my thought, and then you can tell me if you agree or not. I think this is a huge difference because nothing like 9/11 is going to happen at any time in the near future because they don't have a place where they can train as Al-Qaeda did.
On the whole, I agree with that. I think a 9/11 could occur. I think you as an individual, without being a member of any group, or I, frankly, could do hideous things. It only takes one person. It doesn't take a lot of money, and it doesn't take particular skill to kill a lot of people. Each time a terrorist attack occurs, it will be, oh, what an elaborate, sophisticated attack, whether it's the 9/11 attack, which was sophisticated, or I think it's June 11 in London, March 11 in Madrid, and choose your attack, or Paris attack, disco attacks, and so on. But frankly, what it takes is someone who knows how to make a bomb. One can learn this, with a few clicks, or by going to the library or taking a course in high school level chemistry. And then one needs to read timetables or schedules for a club, and that's about. And then be willing to kill people. That's about it. And one of the trends in history is as our technical knowledge as a species increases, the lethality of individuals increases too. So a terrorist during the Roman Empire could kill you with a knife or a sword. By Guy Fawkes' day in 1607, I believe it was, he'd blow up Parliament. And then in 2001, you could bring down two of the largest buildings in the world. And people, even with high school, I recall my high school physics. Building an atomic weapon becomes an engineering problem, which is incredibly difficult, happily, but no longer one of knowledge. So it's you don't need a group to for all of us to be at risk.
Well, to do something that big, though, you do. I mean, a single person cannot do 9/11.
Yes. To make a nuclear weapon, yes, but to make a car bomb.
No, I get your point. But
yeah.
The Taliban and ISIS Khorasan are enemies with each other, but they are both allies with the Haqqani network. And sometimes they also collaborate in some attacks. So what's the role of the Haqqani network in their relationship?
Well, I think probably the better way to frame it is what's the role of the Pakistan intelligence service. I think all of these groups have been, I don't think, no, have been allowed safe haven in the Northwest frontier provinces, have periodically, if not systematically, received resources, logistics, training, and protection by the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service. Pakistanis deny it. They view this as CIA plotting to undermine Pakistan. That's all garbage. It's clearly established that they have and do. So life would be harder for all three of them, and they may not have survived had they not had two things. One point I made, which is the support, tacit and often it's not overt, but substantive and direct, of the Pakistani intelligence service, or at least factions of the Pakistani intelligence service. And the second thing, which is not entirely Pakistan's fault, is that Pakistan only has halting and sporadic exercise of the sovereignty of the state over the parts of Pakistan. And so they can't control everything also.
You said a couple of times during this discussion we're having that the war was lost. But isn't it a bit unfair to say so? Because the goal of war in Afghanistan was to destroy terrorist bases, which they did. So the situation is now different. So I don't think it's completely fair to say the US lost the war. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. I think the destruction of the Taliban, the invasion of Afghanistan by the U.S., actually by about 120 CIA officers and 120 special forces officers and a couple of airplanes. I mean, it was a brilliant one of the triumphs of intelligence and special forces and military campaigns ever. But what was our mission? Which is at the heart of your question, I think, in the heart of what should all be all of our frustrations, and which is the explanation for why the Taliban won. What was the mission of the United States? The objective was, as you said, to destroy Al-Qaeda. And to do that, we needed to destroy the Taliban, who were harboring them. That was a resounding success. What then became the mission? It morphed into, well, we're fighting international terrorism, so we can't allow this to become, this being Afghanistan, to become a safe haven again. Okay, well, that meant we just sat there. And then it became, well, we aren't going to do nation building, but we have to, if we don't want to stay, we have to have someone in lieu of the Taliban. So we have to nation build, even though we say that we don't, or didn't intend to. And that became the mission, grudgingly, but never formally. And then to succeed in that implied an open-ended, basically eternal presence, occupation of the control of the country, because the state was not viable. And so our mission became this endless war to avoid losing. That was the mission. And is that the mission the U.S. should have accepted? No,
And it was accomplished.
For another 20. I would love Afghanistan to have female heads of companies and parks where genders, whatever gender, can fly kites, and whatever humans want to do. I am profoundly liberal. I've devoted my life to those ideals, not to solely to the greatness of a particular flag, but that, for me, that's not the vital mission of the United States in this instance. Writ large, perhaps globally, perhaps that should be the mission, or is the mission of the U.S. But to pursue that, we have to know where our vital interests and challenges lie, and they lie more in Beijing than they do in Kabul.
Many thanks for your time, Glenn, and for your very precise and precious explanations about Afghanistan. Thank you all for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks.